Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Virgil Wood, co-founder of the Jubilee National Collaborative, and it's my delight to have you meet one of the other co-founders, Dr. Owen Cardwell. Dr. Cardwell and I have had a long association in the work we do in church leadership, education, higher education as well, and especially our work with Martin Luther King. And the work that we're involved in right now is also Dr. James Dixon of Houston is one of the co-conveners of the Jubilee National Collaborative. And each of us comes with a bevy of collaborators and colleagues and partners. And we're delighted that we have the privilege of serving the present age families, youth, communities, and even nations. And Dr. Cardwell will share with you his own special work, and I'm delighted to present him now. Dr. Cardwell, Owen.
Dr. Wood, it's a delight, as always, to be with you and to share with those that are listening in some of the work that the Lord has privileged us to do together. As you well know, after 50 years in the ministry, this year will be 51. Wow. I had the opportunity to return to my hometown, Lynchburg, as a distinguished professor at the University of Lynchburg, and had retired from pastoring. Thought that I was done with pastoring, but the Lord opened up a miraculous pathway for me to be able to follow in the footsteps of Haywood Robinson and Dr. Virgil Alexander Wood to be the current pastor of Diamond Hill Baptist Church. And in that transition, wonderful resources have been made available to be able to coalesce some of the various works that we've done over the past years. As you're well aware, Dr. Wood, when I was in Richmond, I had founded New Canaan International Church. We had a church-based nonprofit 501c3, had created a model that we called HADA, Heroes and Dreams Academy. For a long time, it was an actual face-to-face academy. And then these later years, because of the advent of the internet and all that we're able to do virtually, it became more of a virtual academy and more of a kind of a guiding principle. But we've had an opportunity over those years to work primarily with families that were impacted by incarceration, and that led us into a lot of different pathways. We had the opportunity to work with you, Dr. Wood, and the Children's Defense Fund on a process that we developed called Reversing the Jail Trail. 3 elements to the jail trail: the front end, which is really kind of a prevention, trying to keep young people off of that pathway. The middle of the jail trail, those that were actually incarcerated. We had opportunities to work in prisons in Virginia and in local jails. And then, of course, the big issue around reentry and family reintegration with those that were returning from incarceration. Much of that work ultimately led us to really concentrating more and more on the preventive end. You remember, because we've shared this story many times. I think the first time I saw it was in a national publication from one of our civil rights organizations. I can't remember which one it was now, but the story about the 2 men in the boat fishing, and they looked up and babies were floating down the river, and they jumped out of the boat and started tossing babies out of the river as fast as they could. And then one looked up and he saw that his partner, he thought, had abandoned him and was wading upstream. He said, "Where are you going?" The partner said, he said, we've got a lot of babies that we've got to get out of here. They just keep coming. So the partner said, I'm going upstream to see where they're coming from in the first place. So, trying to see where we were getting this movement on this jail trail in the first place ended up becoming some of the work that we're doing here at the University of Lynchburg and with Diamond Hill Baptist Church. In our doctoral work that you, Dr. Wood, was very instrumental in. In fact, when I think about it, each of my 3 bites at the PhD apple, you were the catalyst. The first one was at Boston College. You remember they had that program in social justice?
Right.
I wasn't quite ready for the journey then. So after one semester, I just kind of dropped out. And many of those that were in that class were much younger. And since it was around social justice, it really had a lot to focus on the civil rights movement. And since I was one of those participants, I felt like I knew more than the rest of the class. So it was probably some of my arrogance that kept me from doing that. And then you were instrumental in me going to Liberty University in the PhD program there in counseling. You and Dr. Jerry Falwell were instrumental in that. And after 3 years of doing the coursework, I decided that counseling was not for me. I was afraid I might choke somebody sitting across listening to them telling their problems all day long. But then finally, you had helped to start this PhD program, Martin Luther King specialization PhD program at Union Institute University, and I'm so proud and happy that the Lord delayed that process for me to be able to be one of those that was blessed to get that degree at Union, because that was a life-changing decision. And at least ostensibly, I'm a King scholar now.
You are.
But that PhD work really helped to kind of set the stage for how I think about the work that we do. Now, there's a lot to be said about process. So many times we find ourselves so overwhelmed by all the problems in our communities that we just end up doing without creating a theoretical framework. And so doing that doctoral work helped me to put together this theoretical framework that first of all kind of dealt with Joseph Campbell's heroic journey. When I became aware of that story, and I realized that the elements of the heroic journey had been captured by Hollywood, and that many of the movies that we see about heroes that come out of Hollywood really follow that format or formula of the heroic journey. I began to realize that as Campbell pointed out, that heroic journey has certain elements that everybody goes through. We just don't know that we're going through that. And you don't have to be a big H hero. You don't have to be a Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela or what turns on some of the young people are those superheroes. You don't have to be a Batman or a Superman. But we're all on that journey. And my conversation, at least my doctoral conversation with Joseph Campbell, was that you got it partly right, Dr. Campbell. You got this hero's journey, but so many people are unnecessarily on a victim's journey. And there are others that they don't know it, and as long as they're alive, they have a chance to change it, but they find themselves on a villain's journey. And so the same elements are there. The difference is in the decisions that are made along the process. So I thought that if we could introduce young people to this idea of the hero's journey that has 3 stages and 17 different steps in Campbell's original model, that as they were on their life trajectory and watched themselves going through a sense of a call, sometimes that sense of call can be something positive. Sometimes it could be a negative element that took place in your life. But you answer that call, and then you find yourself crossing the threshold into this journey. Along the journey, you meet both those that help you on the journey and those that try to impede your journey. So since we all kind of go through that process, my thinking was that if we could help young people to learn the heroic journey process, that when they came upon these elements in the process, it would not surprise them, but they would be able to say, oh, I recognize what's going on with me. This is where I am in this process. And then we added to that element this whole Otto Scharmer theory called Theory U, that essentially goes through 5 or 6, depending on who's kind of telling it, 5 or 6 different steps. And the U is exactly as it says. It's a form of a U, and it starts with moving from what Scharmer refers to as downloading, all the way through the U to the point where you come to beginning to operate from the emerging future. Scharmer argues that one of the things about leadership is that very often we find ourselves operating from a blind spot. We don't recognize the source that propels us in our leadership decisions and our leadership movement. And so I found going through the elements of the U to be very helpful as it overlays this idea of the heroic journey. And the idea of downloading is that most of us, most of the time, when we're confronted with a new situation or a challenge or what have you, we kind of search our memory banks to understand whether we've seen this situation before and how we've dealt with it before. And so Scharmer calls that downloading. And the idea is to move through this U process to where you begin to say, well, oh, this challenge, let me see what the call of the future is. And that spoke to me because in our Christian concept, we often talk about purpose. We often talk about a divine call. It also resonated with the call in the heroic journey process. And so you move through the elements of the U. At the bottom of this U is the coalescing principle that's called presencing, being present and sensing what's happening in the present. And in that process, in Scharmer's model, you answer 2 existential questions. Who am I and what am I called to do? And I added a 3rd element to that, whose am I? You know, understanding that there is a sense in which I have accountability. And of course, if we follow our spiritual heritage, that whose am I, the answer for many of us is God. But that also could be expounded out to whose am I in the sense of am I my brother's keeper? Who among my human compatriots am I accountable to and responsible for? And so, and then the last element of that really came in just the last couple of years. I was introduced by some of our colleagues that you and I were working with at Virginia Tech to a wonderful, wonderful assessment tool developed by the Gallup people called the Clifton Strength Finder. The Clifton Strength Finder helps people to identify their top 5 talents. George Clifton was the developer of this instrument. He was a positive psychologist. He interviewed leaders, tech industry leaders from around the world, and found out that there were certain elements that he could look at that express how they became successful in their areas. And he ended up meshing them into 34 different, what he calls strength themes. And the interesting thing about the Gallup assessment is that the Gallup people are also pollsters. They do surveys. And so they've done a lot of research around this, and they've administered this in Fortune 500 companies all over the world. And they've discovered that only 1 in 256,000 people have the same 5 strengths, and only 1 in 31 million people have the same 5 strengths in the same order. So it becomes a very particularized way of identifying your strengths. And I'm beginning to discover in working with young people that young people get turned on when they can begin to process from a point of understanding their strengths. They can understand their strengths, and it flies in the face of the way that we have dealt with youth development. Very often we're trying to fix young people to deal with problems or weaknesses that they perceive or that we perceive. And the Strength Finder helps us to acknowledge that there are some weaknesses, but you manage those. You don't focus on those. You focus on developing your strengths. So that kind of put together the model, and I think that that kind of answers the initial question that you asked me. I know that was an Encyclopedia Britannica answer, probably to a Reader's Digest question, but
it was very precise. So it was a great lead in to what we talk about next. I just want to mention that people can see I'm wearing my blue jacket here with my name on it. Indicate that I'm a proud Phi Beta Sigma. Owen is a proud Kappa man.
Yes.
But all of us are part of the Divine Nine. And
Yes.
also in the Divine Nine know what we're talking about. There is an assignment from the work Owen and I do. We want people who are hearing us to know that the fraternities and all of the male groups, including Promise Keepers, all of that, will have an opportunity to take this information here and help people turn their lives around and get on a track towards success, a success track. And Owen is going to talk in a minute about the GPS for total success. And he's also going to talk about workbooking, the workbook for resurrecting Black men and Black boys, Black men resurrecting Black boys. And he's going to share that with you. But here's what I want to indicate first. I want you to know that you can go to our website after hearing this today, and it's probably going to be also going to be on YouTube, but it also will be available on our website, which is belovedcommunityinstitute.org, and you'll be able to go there. And I want to say also that the sisters of the sororities, all of the women, different groups, they will work. We call this Jubilee Womanhood, resurrecting and raising Jubilee girls. And then in the middle of all of that is the family. And when the Black man or the brown man or whatever comes into his real manhood, that's what we call Jubilee manhood. And it's that last scripture in Malachi that talks about turning the hearts of the children to the fathers and the hearts of the fathers to the children. And Owen, I know you'll say something about that as well in your playbook, but I just want to say the sisters, we're coming, and there are people already mobilizing the sororities, and we'll have more to say about that just a little later. But we had to prioritize saving the Black man because he's being sucked through a giant suction machine, and he doesn't know how to withstand it. And that's what I love about the great work you're doing, Owen. But would you share more with us now, Owen, about the workbook that will be available for those who will be working with us on this particular mission?
Well, we're working on the details of the workbook, and hopefully it's going to be available in about 2 months. We're doing and writing at the same time, even though we've been involved in this work now for some, I guess it's been 22, 23 years or more.
Right.
And so we've got a lot in our rearview mirror, so to speak. But the working title is Handbook for African American Male Development, GPS for Total Success. That might sound like a rather ambitious title, but we have some demonstrated success in making that kind of claim. And we have an opportunity through our combined work at the University of Lynchburg and Diamond Hill Baptist Church to do some additional living laboratories, if you will. And I don't want to sound like we're treating people like experiments, but we're getting experience as we do this work. And so one of the things that we're currently involved in is a partnership with a local organization called Beacon of Hope. They have what they call a 21st Century Promise program here in Lynchburg, where every child that graduates from high school in Lynchburg is guaranteed an education. They can go to the community college, and then from the community college, 2 years at the community college, they can then go to any of the 4-year institutions that are in partnership. That money is the last money in, so it's kind of the money that bridges that opportunity for them. So Beacon of Hope and one of the middle schools in Lynchburg City Schools had some leftover 21st century money. And Dr. Wood, I want to say, I've been able to witness firsthand how devastating this coronavirus pandemic has been on the education of our children, and in particular, children that are in underserved communities that have less access to internet, less access to family support. And that's not a denigration on the family, but sometimes, mother and father have to work in order to be able to keep food on the table, and those kids are left there with having to do this on their own. And it's been devastating over this past year. We have committed to working with just 12 youth from the middle school. We're still in a hybrid education system here where kids are in school 2 days, alternating days, and then 1 day in the week is for administrative purposes. So we're supposed to have 12, but we've only seen 3 or 4 of these kids because they are demotivated. And we've got to do something over this summer to recapture the learning that has been lost, over this process. And then the second thing that we're involved in is influence makers here in the city of Lynchburg have come together under the leadership of the new president that we have at the University of Lynchburg. And we're identifying a geographical area. I know that in Houston, neighborhoods are very, very defined. Neighborhoods have names in Lynchburg, but the geography is not quite as defined. And so you can say that you live on Diamond Hill, and that's just kind of a loose. So we've set up an actual geographical carve out, if you will, of a catchment area that includes the church and several other organizations. There are about 3 or 4 other churches in the catchment area. The Juvenile Detention Center is in that catchment area. There's a big nonprofit, family-oriented nonprofit in the area. There are 4 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and both of the high schools serve that catchment area. And so the idea is, rather than trying to spread resources thin over the entire city, to let's focus in on this one neighborhood, put enough ample resources in to see what can possibly take place. and then, move outward. Lynchburg has the second highest poverty rate in Virginia, with just under 20%. And this is not the Lynchburg that I grew up in. This is just not the Lynchburg. We didn't have that kind of poverty rate, but those are the challenges that are facing us, that really care and concern about our people.
Thank you, Owen. What I want our listeners to understand is that we have about 40 partners around the country, part of our Jubilee National Collaborative. And you'll see groups that used to be SCLC, that used to be OIC, the Leon Sullivan's work. And you will see, in effect, what we call church, town, and gown.
Yes.
And we've got to address all of the critical variables in some sort of, there's a process called syntegration. I want to mention that this summer, online, virtually, we will hold several syntegration learning intensive, community-wide learning through this process. Dr. Cardwell and I have been through this with East St. Louis, when they were trying to plan how to, the city of East St. Louis, I think it was the home of Dorothy Dunham, the dancer, just a grand design. The person who gave us the geodesic dome, we find that when you talk about love, if you don't understand that love has a humane, cultural dimension, but love has a scientific dimension, we don't get to that. Vernon Johns wanted to debate with Martin in 1959 after King had started talking about the beloved community. Johns wanted to talk about what he called the ultimate community. And I think what Johns was, and in fact, did a paper, we have a paper in our archives that he, on his speech, called The Technique of Community. Beloved community, we often think of the why of that. Our HBCUs have been very good at that for the most part. And maybe this is a place we ought to say also that part of the reparations that we've got to do in America is to restore every HBCU with a new mission, so that the bridge that brought us over must not be left in disrepair. And I'm glad that our current president is defining infrastructure as human as well as physical. And so anyway, love has the humanity, I call it, the human side to it. Then the power is the technical side of it. Yeah. And when you get love and power in balance with each other, stretched but balanced, and this is what integration does, justice results. Justice is what holds the whole thing together. And justice is always economic. There's no justice that is not also economic, has an economic dimension. So we're talking about how do you balance love, power, and justice. Yes. And what you're hearing from Dr. Cardwell, perhaps some of our other presenters later, other dimensions of that. Some of you have heard Dr. Ron Hulbert already on some parts of that. But I encourage you to go to our website, go to the library. You will have an opportunity to listen to Dr. Cardwell's chat right here now. It's a heart of a lecture. This is the intellectual part of what we're talking about. We're not doing a fly-by-night thing. We have scholars who have gone to the depth of whatever they're doing, and they're paid the price to be as smart as they are. So don't try to get smart with our scholars, because they paid the price to really know what the devil they're talking about. And when it comes to human transformation, that's what you're hearing now. Dr. Cardwell, perhaps you'll say more about the partnership among these community institutions, the faith groups, yes, higher ed, the public schools, the business community. That's a big one. The business community got to step up, and they've got to put some resources on the table, because the churches, for the most part, in our fraternities and sororities, have been carrying a burden that benefits the nation, even when the nation wasn't putting anything on the table. So the corporate America must be at the table with us as a full partner and pony up what they need. But it must be clear that Leon Sullivan taught us, we put our own dime on the table first. Then there's some people out there who have great wealth. You want to be a part of this? You don't know what to do? Come and put $1 on top of our dime. And then together we'll go get that public dollar and we'll have $2.10. We'll wipe out poverty in 7 years. But Owen, I'm just so thrilled as how God has used our journey together. I'll never forget the night when you and I both were with Martin. He was here with us in Lynchburg. We had brought him here in 1962, just before we went to jail in Danville together. I hadn't planned to go to jail that night, but after Martin spoke, we found ourselves. But Owen, if you would say a word about this mobilization we're talking about now. We have inner resources in our community. We just got to get them all together and on the same page.
You know, Flojo, the great Olympian, Florence Joyner, was also a resident of East St. Louis. Right. But that disintegration process that you talk about really speaks to one of the elements that one of the points that Otto Scharmer makes, that we are constantly coming up with solutions that nobody wants. The importance of having all of these entities at the table, but included in those entities have to be the so-called people that we serve. I don't know that we so much serve them as they inform us, right. You know, and remind us of the human element here, that we're not some. We're not treating them like you know, rats in an experiment, but that they have a say in this. So when everybody comes to the table, the solutions emerge from the conversations and the interactions, and it's important. We have in this we call it Lynchburg Tomorrow. We have in this process the Business Alliance. We have Community Foundation at the table. We have the superintendent of schools. We have the chief of police. We have the chairman of the school board. We have the mayor of the city, all sitting down at this table, and we've been engaged in a deliberative process. I'm about to, as you reminded me a couple of weeks ago, I'm about to introduce the disintegration process to this group, because we've just been having convenings and having conversations, and you know, it's like the adage, always learning, never doing. We're at the point where we need to do something now, and come out of these silos. That's the other thing that has to happen in our communities. There are organizations in our communities that are doing fabulous work, but they'll never move the needle simply on the basis of the work that they do in these silos. We have to have a collective impact model, and that's what disintegration allows us to do. It allows us to sit in a room or in a space, you know, over 4 or 5 days, and come out at the end of it with a playbook. And that's what we saw, a playbook that we can commit to, not something that's been imposed upon us, but that one that has emerged from the collective minds of everybody that's been in the room. So I'm real excited about the potential of that in every single community across America and across the globe, really.
Owen Cardwell, Owen C. Cardwell Jr. I rejoice as I hear you and think about your father. And he was such a pillar in our work there, always with a great spirit, smart as a whip. I guess your mama and your daddy must have been real smart. But I'm glad also that Lynchburg had the good sense to come and ask you to come home. And there you are in a community that helped you to become who you are. And you're there now to help not just the young people, but every age of people, the old people who want to leave life at the end with a flourish. and the young people who want to learn from the old folks. And together we will have that beloved community called Lynchburg together. And I want to remind our listeners today that once you avail yourself of listening to Dr. Cardwell's lecture over and over as you like from your home, go to our library and the website, belovedcommunityinstitute.org. I want you to take this opportunity to really hear what he's saying and then write your own questions, and you will have an opportunity to come on a website and discuss with him how you will implement, what you need to do to implement whatever it is you want to do, so that we won't spend our time giving you this background information. You will have an opportunity to do that at home. But once you do that, come on, and you'll have the information from our website, how to come on the times he's presenting, and it will be about how do I get this done, or how does our family get this done? Because part of this is something we call the kitchen table summit, family kitchen table summit. That's like a Sabbath observance for every family. And what you're trying to do is to live together with the children in such a way that when they're not around you anymore, they've gotten enough out of that relationship in the family that they can face anything they encounter when they're not with the family. But once a week, that's what we've got to learn from our brothers and sisters of the Jewish faith. The Sabbath keeping was demanded and commanded. And again, Owen, I want to say my own personal word of delight and gratitude. And I'm glad that we can rejoice in this work, because people in the church will understand that bottom of all of this is helping people turn their lives around so that they can face the place and the one who made them who they are. God is, and we're never ashamed to say so. God bless you all. And thank you so much.
And can I say, as we close out, none of this would have been possible had Dr. Virgil Wood not poured into a little 14-year-old so many years ago, and continued to do that over these ensuing years. So thank you. I owe you a debt of gratitude.
And it's very mutual. And I think I would end what I've got to say right here now, as the great Duke Ellington would say, I love you madly.
It's mutual.
Thank you. Thank you.